Hey guys, things are about to get personal today. I am sharing with you my story of healing from adrenal fatigue. Even as a holistic health practitioner, I am not immune to any of the things that I talk about here on this channel, including adrenal fatigue and hormonal imbalances. I've for sure had my share, but the good news is I've learned how to heal from them, and I want to share this story with you guys today as well. If you have not hit the subscribe button yet, hit the subscribe button. You'll be notified anytime I post new content on this channel relating to holistic health, women's health, and hormones, and I would love to have you here. So I have had a long battle with adrenal fatigue, not once, but twice in my life, and I figured out exactly how to heal it and exactly how to kind of prevent the ebbs and flows of getting into deep adrenal fatigue, and I want to share that with you guys today too. I work with patients on this on an every single day. The Heal Your Hormones Masterclass is exactly about this as well, and I just think it's so imperative because so many women are dealing with these types of things. So if you don't know what adrenal fatigue is, I want to back up and share that with you first. Adrenal fatigue is somewhat of a controversial diagnosis. I still use that name because a lot of other people use it as well, but it's most commonly known as something called HPA axis dysfunction. HPA axis is your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland axis. And the thing that happens is in your brain, your hypothalamus and pituitary gland communicate with your adrenal glands. In your adrenal glands, you produce certain hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, some DHEA, little bits of progesterone, all kinds of different things. And so when you're under stress, your adrenal glands act up, or your brain tells your adrenal glands, hey, this is a stressful situation, that we might be under danger here. Go ahead and release some cortisol and adrenaline to get in this fight or flight response so that we can really get through the situation. So when you're under prolonged stress, your cortisol levels increase too high, and then your body starts to get symptomatic of too much cortisol or being exposed to too much cortisol. After time, the thing that happens, if it's been a prolonged amount of time, months or years, then your cortisol level starts to tank. So there's sort of like phases of adrenal fatigue. So phase one is mostly like, a job interview or something that's just super stressful that day. Then it goes into phase two that might be a little bit longer. Phase three is when cortisol comes up and you start to notice symptoms that I'm going to tell you here in a second, but also simultaneously your body is compensating for that extra cortisol. And so things happen like decreased progesterone, decreased sex hormones, decreased DHEA and testosterone. You start to notice these different things. You may notice digestive system issues, your digestive fire or bile enzymes and acids start to be impacted. Your microbiome starts to be impacted in your gut. Your inflammatory markers start to increase, all kinds of things which can create symptoms all over your body, which is why it is called a syndrome. The fourth stage that happens is when cortisol actually starts to tank. So it just can't keep up with the demands of the stress that you need. And so your cortisol level starts to tank, sex hormones are tanking, all the things that I talked about in phase three are happening, as well as neurotransmitter levels can start to be impacted, like serotonin, dopamine, those things as well. And so what happens is in the third phase of this kind of adrenal fatigue syndrome, what happens is you start to notice things like feeling really tired and wired. Like that you're tired, but you're just up and amped, kind of like that adrenaline feeling. You may start to notice more anxiety, start to feel more irritable. Your immune system might be down. You might start to notice that you're getting like colds and flus or infections or cold sores, things like that more often. You might start to notice some digestive symptoms, maybe like bowel movement stuff or motility things, or you're just not digesting your food as well, bloating. You might notice some inflammation things. So you might notice joint pain or muscle aches. You're not recovering as well from your workouts. Your sleep's impacted. Maybe it's taking a long time to go to sleep, or you're waking up in the middle of the night from 1 to 3, just laying there worrying, wondering why you're awake, counting the sheep, all of that stuff. That can happen when cortisol is high. Then that leads into, like I said, different sex hormone things. So you might notice PMS being worse, or regular periods, ovulations off, breast tenderness. It can impact the the liver in a way that slows down the filtering part of it and can increase symptoms there in terms of sex hormones. And then the low levels of cortisol can start to, you feel tired, you feel really burnt out, you feel like, oh my gosh, I slept 8 hours and I am just zonked. I can't even wake up. I felt when I had low levels of cortisol that I just had to drag myself to the coffee pot. Like my husband would put coffee by my bedstand when my babies were little. And I obviously wasn't sleeping through the night because I had little babies and stuff too. And my kids notoriously don't sleep very well. But I would feel like I had to just drag myself to the coffee pot, and that was like what I had to do to survive in the morning. And as well as higher levels of anxiety, higher levels of overwhelm, feeling a non-resilience to stress. So maybe the kids spill Play-Doh on the floor, for example, and you used to just be like, okay, no big deal, like just pick it up. And now that just sets you over the edge. These are all common things that happen when you have cortisol dysregulation. So that's really what we're talking about with adrenal fatigue. A lot of Western doctors don't call it adrenal fatigue. They don't want to hear about adrenal fatigue. I always say this. A lot of alternative medicine practitioners will call it that. I always say this. I don't care what you call it. The truth of the matter is these things are happening. Brain detects stress, starts to get freaked out, tells your adrenal glands to produce the fight or flight response and excess cortisol, which leads to these symptoms. So this is what's happening. And this is a common reason, you guys, that so many women come to me and they're like, I just don't feel like myself. I'm having, this laundry list of things, and maybe they go to their doctor and they're just like, yeah, you're a mom, you're a new mom, you're a woman, you have a stressful life, you have a career, you're an entrepreneur, these things. But what's happening is it's due to this stress response that's occurring inside of you. And the good news is we can heal this. So one thing that I dealt with when I was dealing with this, the first time I ever dealt with this was actually when I was in acupuncture school, ironically. I was working at a gym, personal training. I used to be a personal trainer. I still am a personal trainer, actually. But I worked in a gym as a personal trainer. And I was getting there at 5 a.m. And then I would go to school, do didactic classes, and then I would have clinic. And then sometimes I would go back to didactic classes. And so sometimes my days would be somewhere between, 5 a.m. to getting home at 9 p.m. at night. And super, super long days. In the midst of that, I was getting engaged, getting married, trying to figure out, our next steps. It was a really stressful time in my life. I think it is for a lot of, I was in my 20s, figuring out kind of the next step, society putting a lot of pressure on you to get married, find the person you're going to live your life with, succeed, start building your wealth, all of those things. Meanwhile, you're super young and you have no idea what to do. So that's kind of where I was when I was 25, and I was just dealing with all these symptoms. I was pounding energy drinks at the time, couldn't sleep very well. My periods weren't really coming. I was losing weight, actually, which in our 40s is, in 30s, 40s, 50s is usually not what happens. But at that time, I just wasn't eating enough. So my adrenal glands from under eating were also shot. I was over exercising, which also didn't help the cause. And I was just kind of a mess. And so I was in acupuncture school. And so what I did is I got acupuncture all the time. And I talked to one of my clinic teachers, and he was like, you really got to reduce your stress. And I was like, yeah, no, duh. I know that. I get it. But how? I had no tools in the toolbox to know how to reduce stress. I didn't understand at the time that my personality was actually causing the stress. It's never necessarily the stressors. It's how you're responding to the stressors that really kills us and causes this stress response. So I was responding to my stress in a way that I was a perfectionist, type A, people pleaser, OCD, all of these things that I was just putting an enormous amount of pressure on myself. So when I describe stress, I like to talk about a stress reservoir. And I talked about this all in a video about boosting your low progesterone, which happens when you have adrenal fatigue. So go check that out as well. But in this stress reservoir, you have physical, mental, and emotional stressors. So things like under eating, things like over exercising, things like eating low carb, things like training for marathons, which all the things I was doing. I was doing all of those things. So all of them were just adding into this reservoir. Then I added on the demanding schedule that I had and training clients and dealing with family members, and the list goes on there, mental stressors. And then I added on my own personality characteristics that made me more sensitive to these things, like being a people pleaser, being an empath, being really sensitive, being a perfectionist, all of these things. And you just had stress after stress after stress after stress going in this reservoir, right? And so eventually it overflowed and it was like, hey, yo, I can't, my hormones were like, hey, I can't keep up with this anymore. You know, you're going to feel tired. You're going to be burnt out. You're going to miss your periods. We can't do this anymore. So what I did was I started getting acupuncture all the time, started with herbs. And to be honest with you guys, that stuff helped. It helped a good amount, actually. I felt better. I was actually having a chronic low back pain at the time, which also is related to this. And it helped a ton. But I was constantly chasing the symptoms. I was constantly like monitoring them, paying attention to them, having to get all of this stuff all the time, but I was never addressing the root cause of it. And it took me until after I kind of healed, actually, I was able to get pregnant. I, you know, took the right supplements and herbs, and pretty much I like to kind of think about it as mended my body well enough, kind of just like put it back together haphazardly, put some Band-Aids on places that it was okay. Then I had my kids, and I had my kids 2 years apart. And after the first one, I was tired. He was a really bad sleeper. I was exhausted. I was trying to start my business at the time in acupuncture practice, and I was tired. I had some adrenal fatigue, but I was still okay. After my second child was born 2 years later, that's when everything changed for me. I was a practitioner for a few years at this point, and I was just in the depths of adrenal fatigue. This is when my husband had to put the coffee out by my bedstand for me to even be able to get up in the morning. My kids weren't sleeping. I was super stressed. We were trying to build my acupuncture business still after having 2 kids. We were trying to figure out our next house situation because the house that we had lived in was way too small for my family. We were dealing with all of these different things, and I was stressed. I was so stressed, and I had some postpartum anxiety going on that was untreated. I was trying to, you know, again, do herbs and things like that, but I was unable, I think, to see the light at the end of the tunnel at figuring out what to do for myself. And so eventually I started sleeping a hair more, and I started to get a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, so where I could have some introspection and started being able to help myself. I was still having low back pain, and I read this book called Healing Back Pain. And my husband found it because we knew my back pain was related to stress, actually. And this is what actually started to change my life and made me into the practitioner that I am today, by actually learning this mind-body connection. So in this book, Healing Back Pain, it's by a doctor called Dr. John Sarno. And he talks about how he's an orthopedic surgeon, and he talks about how he knew that people's back pain was so inconsistent. Some people would have, you know, herniated discs, and he did a bunch of studies. And so some people had, you know, horrible back pain with their herniated disc. Other people had them and had no back pain. Other people's back pain would sort of like ebb and flow, and he just couldn't understand it. He would do surgery. He'd look at the images, you know, they'd look the same. 2 different levels of pain would be happening. And so he started to realize that there was a certain personality characteristic of perfectionism, people pleaser, type A, all the things I am, and especially was, that really contributed to all of these things happening. And he did that in the 80s. And so fast forward 30 years, we've come a long way into realize how much our stress response and cortisol and this mind-body connection actually does cause these symptoms. And so I was still taking herbs and vitamins and doing my nutrition better, eating carbohydrates at this point, eating more protein, things like that. But I had to start unpacking the perfectionism, the people pleasing, the type A personality, these types of things, so that I could stop my brain from being freaked out all of the time and telling my adrenal glands to produce tons and tons of cortisol and adrenaline. And so over the years, I have used what I call my 5 pillars to hormone health, and this is what I've used to heal myself and hundreds of patients since then. because I know that so many practitioners out there, you know, say, take the supplements and do this expensive testing and, you know, do this elimination diet. You probably can't have gluten and dairy and soy and sugar and flour and all the things anymore either to heal from adrenal fatigue. And I did all that, you guys. I did the elimination diets when I was in acupuncture school. I did the food sensitivity testing. It made me undereat further because there wasn't food that I could eat. Luckily now, we're in a place where there's more products out there that can kind of help bridge the gaps. But at this point, this was, you know, so long ago that there really wasn't that many gluten-free products out there yet. They're pretty gross still. They're so much better now. And it caused me to just undereat further. I started losing more weight and be stressed about food all the time. I was constantly like, oh my gosh, I'm starving. I can't have that. Having to plan ahead. I was already overwhelmed. I was already stretched thin. It just didn't help me. And I see that consistently with my patients as well. Yes, there are times that we need to kind of work on some elimination dieting and work through some food issues and things like that. I'm not saying that there's never that in our life and in medicine and in holistic health. There are sometimes, but to just blanketly tell everyone to go on these elimination diets to, you know, reduce inflammation and things like that. We know that stress causes inflammation. In the book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess by Dr. Caroline Leaf, my free Facebook group, Holistic Health with Damron, come join if you haven't joined us, by the way. I'll leave the link in the description. We did a book club this last summer reading that book, and she studied this effect of the mind-body in a really quantitative way that showed through all of her research how much cortisol and toxic thoughts, or how much toxic thoughts and stress and anxiety actually does increase your cortisol level and decrease your DHEA level and increases your homocysteine levels, which is inflammation. We know that these things happen from our toxic thoughts and our stress. And I can promise you for so many of us, this is the root cause to what you're feeling. I've seen it 100,000 times in patients. I've seen it with myself. I've seen it over and over and over. And I know that this is the real deal. I've had colleagues that treat this way also. So moral of the story is we got to fix what's causing this. So when I see patients that come to me and if they've gotten testing or not, and they say, you know, my cortisol level's off, I always ask them why. And maybe they don't know, but she and I go through the stress reservoir and I say, okay, let's talk about physical stressors. Let's talk about emotional stressors. Let's talk about personality characteristics. We have to fix that first. So in my 5 pillars of hormone health, this is where we begin with that. We talk about mindset, stress management, self-care, personality characteristics, so that we can not have our brain be creating this fight or flight response all day, every day. So that's number 1 pillar. Number 2 pillar that helped me heal my adrenal fatigue was nutrition. I started eating carbohydrates. I was scared of carbohydrates, and I'll talk about this in another video. I started my dieting career, I'll say, at age 18 in high school when I started with the Atkins diet. It was 20 grams of net carbs per day, and I lost weight. I was 18. I had a fast metabolism. It worked great until it didn't. Until I got stressed out, needed some comfort food, and ate some French toast. And it literally ruined my mindset around carbohydrates for almost a decade. It was a really long time where I would tell myself every day, don't eat carbs. You know this works. Don't eat carbs. Don't eat carbs. And then I would eat the carbs, overdo it, and then tell myself that again the next day to start. So eventually, I started realizing that I could eat healthy carbs, things like fruit and vegetables and oatmeal and sweet potatoes and things like that. And that actually helped heal my adrenal glands. It actually helped heal my thyroid. It actually helped me feel more energetic and less brain fog, feel less anxious, things like that. So I started eating carbohydrates. I also started paying attention to my protein consumption. So many women come to me that are eating, 60 grams or 50 grams of protein per day. And in reality, we need about 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. And protein does so many great things for us, you guys. Protein is the raw material of all of your neurotransmitters. So things like serotonin and dopamine and GABA, all of our good feeling neurotransmitters, protein, those amino acids, those are the raw materials of that. Protein also helps you to balance your blood sugar. So if you're constantly riding a big blood sugar roller coaster to where you're eating a lot of processed carbohydrates, you know, your 100-calorie packs that I was doing, I was constantly spiking it, eating no fiber, no protein, plummeting, increasing it again, plummeting. And I was riding that to where I felt, you know, I need that sugar and those carbohydrates to help me feel a little bit more energetic. And then I would crash. I'd feel hangry, irritable, anxious, low energy until I did it again. And you really want to balance out that blood sugar curve by eating protein, fat, and fiber at each meal. That's super, super helpful to keep that part of things stable, but also getting in those micronutrients, those minerals, things like B vitamins, magnesium, vitamin C. Those things are all eaten up by stress in the stress response. So you really want to focus on eating as many nutrient-dense foods as you can. Like I said, you don't need to do an elimination diet most likely to get rid of adrenal fatigue. In fact, if your diet is stressing you out, probably not going to help you. It's probably the wrong one for you. So if your diet is stressing you out and your practitioner has told you not to eat anything and you just can't follow it, find a new practitioner. They're not going to work for you. It's not helping. I have so many patients who I see their lab work from different practitioners that say like, basically like, don't eat any of this stuff. And if you can do it, great. We know that that stuff's not super helpful for us, but if it's stressing you out to the point that you're miserable on how you eat, you keep feeling defeated, you keep feeling shame and guilt, that is the wrong approach to nutrition. That's not how nutrition should be. We need to be thinking about what we need to add into our diet instead of take away. I find that to be significantly more helpful than just taking everything away. So more on the abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. I also worked on sleep. So I've always been a decent sleeper. I've never like really stayed up super late and like skimped on sleep. I've always known that I've needed my sleep. My children have had other plans for me many times, but for myself, I've always known that I kind of need a lot of sleep and that feels good to me. So I have not had a huge issue with that, but I have had issues with myself with insomnia due to the cortisol dysregulation of being awake at 1 to 3 a.m. And so I started to work on my blood sugar, work on stress management stuff, but also take some magnesium and some different things, L-theanine, GABA, some different things over the years to kind of help calm me down in the middle of the night as well. And then exercise. I stopped training for marathons. And it's not that marathon training is bad. I think that if your body's in a good place and that's something that you enjoy, absolutely go for it. My husband runs multiple marathons a year, does Ironmans. He's an endurance guy. I've done 4 marathons in my life and just find that in this season of where the kiddos are age-wise, my business, my own enjoyment, time that I want to spend on fitness, it's just not what I want to do right now. So I focus more on strength training about 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes, not a lot, but I actually love what I do. And strength training is helpful for your hormones as well. And then lastly, I did keep going on the supplements. I started taking or kept taking adaptogenic herbs that will help your cortisol response. I started taking some magnesium, some B vitamins, some different things to just help nourish and support my body through times of increased stress, which we all have, right? We've been in a pandemic now for a while. We've all had increased stress. That doesn't even include any of the personal stuff that we've dealt with over the years. And so I've continued to take those types of things. You always want to ask a practitioner what herbs, vitamins, supplements work for you. I can't tell you how many people have come to me over the years that are taking this adrenal supplement that is actually the way wrong thing for them. So like I said, you guys, there's high cortisol and there's low levels of cortisol. And sometimes you can have like low cortisol in the morning and then high at night. It doesn't have to just be this all or nothing thing because cortisol is part of our diurnal pattern or circadian rhythm, and it can change throughout the day. It does change. It's the highest about 30 minutes upon waking, and it dives down throughout the day. So you want to work with a practitioner that's not going to give you something to boost your cortisol higher if you already have high cortisol. Vice versa, you don't want to work with a practitioner that's going to give you something to lower your levels of cortisol when you already have low levels of cortisol. So I've seen this a lot. There's a lot of products out there marketed to adrenal health, adrenal fatigue, and a lot of times they're the wrong products for people and making things worse, for sure. If not better, or if not just maintaining where they are, worse. So you definitely want to work with somebody who knows exactly what they're talking about and know that what can help you too. Okay, this was my story of adrenal fatigue. The moral of the story is I worked on my 5 pillars. This is in the Heal Your Hormones Masterclass. And I also, you know, worked at it for a while, you guys. The mindset stuff is challenging. It's stuff I work with my patients on an every single day basis. It doesn't change overnight because we've been wired in certain ways for decades now. But I promise you that if you have the desire, you can heal. All these symptoms I told you that adrenal fatigue causes or HPA axis dysfunction causes, you can heal. So I want you to get the hope and the empowerment out of this video today that no matter where you are, it's not too late. You can change the course, you can course correct this and feel like yourself again. I hope this was helpful. If you need more tips, tricks, advice, I have a free download for you called 6 Evidence-Based Habits for Healthier Hormones. You can get that at alliedamron.com/habits. Again, totally free download. It has a lot of these same things in there actually, so you'll have it in print copy, so you don't have to take notes on this video. And if you have not hit that subscribe button yet, go ahead and do that so that you're notified anytime I post a new video. I'll talk to you guys soon.